Hi guys, I'm going to take you through a game that I've literally just played against a chess.com member and friend on chess.com. This is Ted Philby. Ted's only 13 years old and has been playing chess for about a month, seriously. He's been following my channel and picking up some tips, so today he challenged me to a couple of games, and I'm going to show you the second game. The first game wasn't so great, but let's go through this. So the purpose of this video is to specifically help Ted to see where potential weaknesses might be, and most importantly, what is the next area to work on. So we'll go through it. So I've got the black pieces, Ted's playing as white. So we're kind of looking at, okay, so Ted's rated like 1057 right now in Rapid. So what is the difference between somebody rated just over 1,000 and a stronger player? So that's what we're going to try and identify, right? Interestingly, he decides to play the Vienna game. So I don't know if Ted's been watching some of my recent videos, but I respond with knight to f6, so leaving open the possibility of a Vienna gambit with f4 right now. But I did warn him in the chat. I said I do know the proper response to this, which would, by the way, be d4. Anyway, so move 3. Ted brings out his light squared bishop to look at f7. Perfectly good move. I do likewise bring out one of my bishops, also attacking the knight. And now the second knight comes out. I bring out my second knight. So we're following good opening principles right now. Both of us have just moved one pawn up to this point, which has enabled us to get one bishop out into the board. Now Ted castles. I'm starting to be more drawn sometimes to castling quickly at the moment, before you've finished developing your other pieces. I think there can be an argument for it, because it simply gets your king to safety quicker, and then you can focus on development, right? So now I just push d6, fairly quiet move, but it does open up the diagonal for my light squared bishop. And now we have d3 from white, and my bishop comes out with the pin on the knight against the queen. I think that if you've got the opportunity to throw in a pin like that, it's only one more string to your bow anyway, because it does mean this knight now can't move. Now I don't know if white was planning to move that knight, but nevertheless it's stuck. And now nearly completed development, bishop to e3. So we've got an interesting pawn structure now. We've got 3 pawns on the light squares for white and 3 corresponding pawns on the dark squares for black. And this looks like a really good structure for white, I have to say. We're on, what move are we on? Move 7, yep. So he's only one, all he's got to do is move his queen now off the back rank, and he's completed development in 8 moves, which is as quick as you can do it. So this is really, really good. So I now decide to capture the knight. So let me talk you through the reasoning for this. So I figure I've got this dark squared pawn structure right now. So what that means is that this bishop here is going to be pretty much constrained to operating in this part of the board, really, right? So, and the king's over there. So it's going to be very hard for this bishop actually to interact with the king in any way. And I figured that actually I liked white's knight more than I like my own bishop. Right now, with my pieces with my pawns on dark squares, my light squared bishop has a lot more scope to move around the board. My dark squared bishop is going to keep running into its own pawns. That's one of the issues. However, conversely, my dark squared bishop can move through white's light squared pawn structure, perhaps a little more easily. But nevertheless, I figured that to move the game along, we'll swap this off. That now obviously gives us a semi-open B file. So at this point I'm thinking castling long is not a sensible idea. So I castle kingside, and the rook comes across to b1. I push b6 to defend, and now white completes development with queen to e2. Now I figure that this knight here on c6 has no real future in the game, this is pointless, it's moving away from the action, and he can't go there or there. So now I'm thinking about manoeuvring my knight round to a more useful spot on the board. h3 is now played to kick the bishop. I was in two minds about this move from white. One issue is that it just slightly weakens the king's side. And was this bishop a serious threat? Was this knight intending to move? Can't go there, can't go there. Is the knight intending to move here? I don't know. So maybe it's not the most accurate move on that one. So I dropped my bishop back anyway to e6, and now I'm offering up the opportunity of an exchange of bishops, and I would obviously recapture with the f-pawn, and white accepts the trade. Now this does a few things. One is that it moves my pawn slightly inward, giving me a little bit of a pawn arsenal in the middle of the board here. So this might open up opportunities later on of like pushing d5, and then if it's captured I can recapture. That would obviously leave this pawn undefended. The other thing that capture does is it means I've now got a semi-open file on the f file, and I've already got my rook on there, so that's no bad thing. So that's quite a quick way to open up the board to one of my most heavy hitting pieces. Okay, and now we have bishop to g5, so attacking this knight here, also in line with my queen, but there's no real threat. This knight is defended actually 3 times once I move my knight to g6. So now on 2 moves this knight has come. Okay, so it's been interrupted, but my knight's continuing its journey round towards the king side of the board and to my opponent's king. Now we have king to g2. So let's look at this. So now you see what white's done is pushed h3, and then after I bring my queen out of line of this knight, then pushes hang on. So I move my knight there, then we've got g3, so now there's a bit of a vacuum here around the king, you see, which isn't great. And so I move my queen out of line of there, and the king moves forward to g2. I now decide to put the question to the bishop with h6. So there's a reason for this. I want the bishop either to get out of the way, and clearly these squares are not good. If the bishop went back to h4, I could take with the knight. Then I guess he's got knight recaptures, that's not too bad. But in any case, the bishop decides to capture the knight on f6. Now I've got 2 ways of recapturing. So I need to decide which is the most threatening, aggressive, or useful. I can take back with the rook, or I can take back with the pawn. Now I've still got a fairly robust pawn structure on the queen side now, and I'm figuring that this king with the pawns that have already moved in front of it might be slightly vulnerable. So I actually decide to recapture with the g pawn. So now I've got quite a pawn majority going on in the middle here, and my idea is simply to move the king out of the way, maybe move my rooks in line with the king, and start some kind of offensive. I'm also noticing that I've got these 2 nice squares here, and if I can get a rook onto the g file, then putting my knight on either of those squares, the rook might then pin the pawn, and the pawn couldn't recapture. So d4 is pushed, and I'm unconcerned. So what I realised then is actually, okay, think about this. So I'm working at the moment on trying to consider alternative moves. Even when I think I've come up with a good move or a good idea, I then think, okay, how can I improve on that? Can I do any better than that? So here, my thought was, okay, right, let's say I move my king there, rook there, and then the knight can come in, okay? But then I think, actually, queen g7 does the same thing but quicker, right? So I don't have to move my king out of the way in order to do it that way. So queen g7, and then my idea is knight into f4, and that comes with a fork on the king and the queen. The only piece that could capture that that knight would be the pawn. But as soon as that knight moves, the pawn is pinned to the king. So this is the critical point in the game, really. I think my opponent has played a very solid game of chess up to this point, but now fails to spot the imminent threat. Now, and just moves the rook across to h1. So one thing that I would wonder is my opponent thinking, is he got the balance maybe slightly off, thinking too much about his own ideas and not enough about mine? Because the thing you have to think is, one of the questions that has to go through your mind is, why did black move that queen to that square? Why did black make that move rather than any of the other moves? What is black's intention with that? Well, okay, what do we know about this move? Well, it puts the queen in line with the king. Okay, so if the queen's in line with the king, then this pawn could potentially be pinned to the king. Okay, what is that pawn protecting? That square, that square. Can anything go to those squares? Yes, the knight. Right, that's the thought process to work through. And with 19 minutes still on your clock, you really ought to be thinking, okay, what are my opponent's ideas with that move? What's he trying to do? You might consider that, but then knight can take, right? So that's not really an option. But that hits the king and the queen. That's something, another pattern to burn into your brain is, when there are knights around, and you've got pieces 2 squares apart on the same line, then you've got to be have your ears pricked up for the possibility of forks from the knight. The same goes if they're 5 squares apart. So here that can fork, here you've got that fork. There are a few different arrangements for, like, there and there can be forked from there, for example. So you just need to practice and drill these typical patterns in your mind. So there's a couple of things going on here. King and the queen 2 squares apart on the same line, and also pawn, the queen now lined up with the king there. So he misses that move, and I go in with knight to f4 with a fork. There's nothing that can be done. The pawn can't capture. King runs away. I'll grab the queen. So I've earned a queen for a knight. So if you also watch my last video, which is like a guaranteed way to improve at chess, where what I say is, from each game, go through the game and analyse any blunders. So clearly that was a blunder because it could have been defended, right? Analyse any blunders, and then you have to ask yourself, okay, what is it about my approach to chess? What is it about the system that I've got, my method, the checklist I go through in my mind with each turn? Where is the weakness in that? So I think in this instance, the weakness is maybe not considering why did my opponent make that move, and then B, what threats are there in this position? And there are clues to the threats, like we've said. That's a clue. Okay, the queen moving in line with the king is a clue. So that should give you a there's something fishy going on here. I'm going to investigate further. What is my opponent trying to do? So there we go. So anyway, grab the queen, and now I decide to move my king to more safety behind this mass of pawns that I've got in the middle. White captures, I recapture again, keeping these 6 pawns now all together. The rook comes in. I kick the rook. Rook now cannot stay on this rank, so it has to retreat. I move my king across, and the rook comes in there. So now what I'm thinking about is, I have 2 pieces in a potential barrage against this knight, but it's got 2 defenders. 2 attackers, 2 defenders, you don't take. So what I want to do is find a way to deflect this rook away from the defense of that knight. So I bring my rook across, rook comes over, ace, a5, rook comes back, and now I'm starting to... Okay, there we go, yeah. So with this capture, I just realised, wow, there's a free pawn fork there. This completely opportunist. This wasn't really mine to spot, it was my opponent's to spot. Realising that, okay, if I take that, then that's possible. Oh no, right? I'm going to lose material. So I wasn't planning that. All I was thinking about was trying to get rid of this rook. But anyway, the rook moves. Now the pawn takes with check. This is clearly an error. I mean, white's in a very, very difficult position anyway, but I have two attackers on there now, and white has two defenders. Okay, but the king can't be the last one. No, so I figure this out. Two attackers, right? Two defenders. Okay, so the idea is, can white capture that pawn, right? And when you've got the same number of attackers as defenders, it's not going to work out well. So takes, and that's it. Now he's in check. I actually missed the checkmate at this point, which is very embarrassing. I could have just played queen takes f2 mate, but the game finishes pretty quickly after that. And there we go. Okay, so young up-and-coming player, only been playing seriously for a month, playing over 1,000 level, and definitely a very, very solid, very sound opening, good, swift opening, which I like very much. I think areas for this player to work on are going to be developing your spider senses. Why did my opponent do that? What is my opponent planning? And what are the threats in this position? So there you go. That's a comparison between a player rated 1050 and someone rated in the 1500s. But all of us have got areas in our game that we need to look out for and work on in particular. I know I do. I mean, for example, missing a checkmate there is something that I should go, oh, now come on. I really didn't consider all the moves on the board there that were available, did I? Okay, so it's always something to learn from every game. That's what's beautiful about this game of chess that we love so much. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe so you can keep up to date with everything that I post. Other than that, see you very soon.